Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Azov Arts University. So today we are going for a very simple topic, and that is what some of beginners are still laying complaints about, and that is they are having issue with knowing how to blend very well with just a ballpoint pen, and that is the main reason for this tutorial today. So all what we are going to do today is just to learn how to blend with the ballpoint pen, specifically for beginners on my channel. So without taking much of our time, let's go straight into the video. So before we get started, we need some few materials to begin our tutorial. So firstly, you will need some pair of pen. I have several pens here with me, but the same brand. You can choose any brand that you are very comfortable with. So I'm going for the big brand here. This is the ballpoint pen I use the most for most of my drawings. And you also need a sketch pad. It can be an ordinary sketch pad like this one, or this kind of sketch pad. You can get it. Both are also good for your pen works. And before starting to shade with the pen, there's something you must understand about the ballpoint pen. As you can see over here, this one has a full ink usage, which means that I haven't used this one at all. This is a very new ballpoint pen. And this one over here has a very little ink left. Now the reason why I'm showing you this is because when you want to blend with a ballpoint pen, you have to start with this that has a full ink. Reason is because starting with this one will give you a very dark value at the beginning, and it tends to bleed at the very first stroke you apply on your paper. But using this one gives you a very light value and smooth shade when you apply your stroke on your paper. So that is the reason why I said you should have different pen with different ink usage. It helps in giving you a very nice artwork at the end. So let's get straight into the video. This is my sketch pad, and for the shading technique that we have, let's say the commonly used one, we have the hatching, we have the cross hatching. These two are commonly used in most of pen works, and we have the scribble, and we have the stippling. Now what I'm going to do here is just to show you the shading technique. Then the next one we'll move on to learning how to blend with this shading technique. So starting with my action, before starting to shade, it's always good to get a piece of paper where you can always scribble on and clean the tip of your pen to avoid this kind of ink stain at the beginning of your shading. So get a paper like this, or a cotton wool, anyone you have available with you. Clean the tip of your pen and make some rough scribble before moving on to shade. So for hatching is a very simple shading technique, and that involves making stroke in a single direction. It can be parallel or horizontally. Just make sure that your shading is in a single position, and make sure your lines are very light and consistent. The spacing in between your lines should be very consistent. So I'm starting off very lightly, and I can increase the pressure Then going over it continuously will help you get a much darker value. It's that simple. With enough practice, you should be able to do this with ease. So that is for arching. And for cross arching, it means overlayering your strokes from multiple direction. It can be double direction, triple direction, or from different angles. So I'm going to start off lightly. Mind you, I'm using the pen with the full ink. Assuming I use this with a much more lesser ink, what you experience, you can see the strokes are much more darker, even though I'm trying to make it light. So that is why I say that anytime you are shading, start with pen with a full ink to give you this kind of light shade at the beginning. Using pen with lesser ink will give you a very dark value where you don't need them. So this is very good for making darker shades when you are shading your artwork. So let's go back to our cross arching. So I'm making sure that my lines are consistently spaced. When making your cross arching, don't do it in a way that your lines to be far, like they are not consistent. It will be hard for you to cover up the spaces. Make sure your lines are very close to each other. Then I move over to another direction, let's say from here. Then I cross arch. Always put it in mind to always start very light to avoid making any kind of mistake while shading. So I can go over and start from another direction. Let's say over here. That is just what cross hatching is all about. The more I overlap my strokes, the much more darker value I get and the more smoother my shading will become. So always put that in mind. That is for our cross hatching. Then for our scribble, this is the simplest. Both the scribble and stapling are the most simplest, but they are not that used as the hatching and cross hatching. So for scribble, it's just like making this kind of shape, like small letter C, or in circles, anyone you choose. That is for scribble. Make sure you don't apply too much pressure while making this kind of shade. Start very lightly. Until you cover up the space you are working on. And one thing I notice about some beginners while shading with pen is that they lack patience. Being impatient with your shading will always give you a bad result at the end. Pen works are not like pencil works, wherein you can easily cover a specific area in no time. But for pen, you have to be very patient while making your shade. this is just scribble. This kind of technique is very good for making skin pores and pimples, anything that has to do with body features. This scribble is very perfect for that. And we have stippling, which means that just drawing random lines. This is mostly used for abstract painting and shading. So that is what stippling is all about. And you can also use stippling for air, like free air sketches, just to make movement of air. That is what stippling is all about. So now that we have talked about the shading technique for your pen work, let's move over to how to blend. With your pen. So let's say we have this is a rectangle. So I'm going to divide this rectangle into 3 parts. Here will be your dark shade. Here will be your middle, that is, let's say, the middle tone, and here will be the light shade. Now in between these lines will determine how well you blend your layers together, how to blend from the dark into the middle into the light. So firstly, I'm going to go over with a light shade using either our hatching or cross hatching technique. As I've said earlier, you need to be very, very patient. Now this will be a rough demonstration in order not to take much of our time. Then later on, I'm going to schedule a live video to show how this can be done in real life. So what I'm doing here is using my cross hatching technique. Then let's say this is my hatching. So I'm going to make the 3 different shades. Then after that, I'm going to blend the 3 different shades together to create a smooth transition. So for my dark shade, I'm going straight with my overblading pen. It makes it more faster for me, but I have to be extra careful by starting to clean the tip first. You can see it's giving me that very dark so I'll continue shading this way until I cover up this area and get that dark value I needed in the first place. Now that my dark tone is ready, I'm going over to make my middle shade. Now that my middle tone is ready, I'm moving over to the light tone. Now that my light shade is ready also, so what I'm going to do now is try blending the three different layers together, and I have to be extremely careful while doing this. That is the reason for this tutorial. So for these spaces I left in between is the blending factor that will determine how well I blend this shade into the middle tone and from the middle tone into the light tone. So I'm going to do that right now. Then I will start shading over the dark shade I made earlier on until I get a kind of value that is similar to it. Then what I try to do is to smooth out these rough edges so I can easily blend my layers. So this is what I'm going to do. I'll just layering cross-hatching strokes until I get a well blended transition between my middle tone and the dark tone. So in order to achieve this easily, I can move over to using my scribble, but in a very disciplined manner. So you can see what I'm doing. This is the method I do use in blending my layers together. So I'll be making tiny strokes until I transition the shade very well. Now that I've achieved that, what I'll do next is to blend from my middle tone to my light tone. and I will do this very lightly. Here I applied a lot of pressure, but over here I'm going to do it with a very light pressure. So once you master this, blending different layers won't be a problem to you as a beginner once you master this skill. So using my scribble in a very soft way, I'll blend my way from my middle shade into my light shade. Then I can use hatching to extend it a little bit. So that is how you blend from your dark to your light using this technique I just displayed to you. Use your scribble to soften the edges, then you're hatching, then scribble over it again, then hatching. That is the way you blend from one value to another value. So that is it for this tutorial. So that will be that for this tutorial, and we've talked about the shading technique used in ballpoint pen, the hatching, cross hatching, scribble, and the stippling, and we move on to how to blend your layers together. So if after this tutorial you still have difficulty in learning how to blend your artwork, I would suggest you drop down an object I can use for my next tutorial. It can be an object or a subject, something I can practice on to show you how this blending technique is being done in a real drawing. So you can drop them in the comment section down below. The comments with the highest number of likes is what I'm going to choose for my next tutorial. So without taking much time, thank you for joining me on today's tutorial, and I hope to see you in my next tutorial.